Why don't we start looking at this painting over here?
That's actually
when they get a chance to get the camera on it.
The painting is a painting of kelp. That's kelp on the seashore, and
there we have it. Yeah, that's kelp.
And what that is, it's from a larger photograph of kelp. Bull kelp grows very quickly. It has a short season. It's not specific to Antarctica. There's bull kelp, for example, in Seattle.
Bull kelp.
B-U-L-L, bull kelp.
Bull kelp. Not like the kelp we might find washed up here?
You could, but it's much larger. It grows about a foot a day.
Wow.
So just so you know, and it's when it's on the beach, it's like these big fat noodles of color, greens, and it was the most surprising color for me to find in the kelp was the yellows. I'm constantly trying to match the yellows that I found there. It was amazing, and a little bit shocking was how bright some of that yellow was.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
To get a sense of that kelp picture there were penguins in the original photo, because this is just a small piece of the original photo, and the penguins were very, very tiny compared to the kelp. And I have painted many...
Penguins are tiny compared to the kelp.
Yes, because the kelp is so big.
What is it, big ropes of it?
It's like noodles. Like just imagine...
Like this big around?
No, it's like a flat.
Oh, it's flat. Oh, flat noodles. Okay.
Yeah, flat noodles.
Egg noodles.
Yeah, yeah, like egg noodles.
How wide would it be? Like...
Oh, they're about this wide.
Wow, I had no idea.
But it's not something that just grows in Antarctica. Like I said, you know, it's elsewhere. When I was in Seattle and Alaska, you know, sea otters, they live in it and play in it. It's more of a cold water.
Kelp is everywhere.
You know, you wouldn't see it necessarily here because it's not quite as cold water.
I think kelp washes.
You certainly have kelp. I don't know if it's that stuff. But the Antarctica summer is short, and the stuff that grows there grows fast.
Wow.
You know, it has its moment, and then it's done.
Well, that's beautiful, but that painting, I never would have thought, well, that's kelp.
I'm always interested in places that are real, that people don't think are real. Like this is pretty close to what it looks like.
That's amazing.
And it's amazing because that's what real life looks like. It can be very abstract.
This is just a very beautiful abstract painting.
Yeah, and I don't mind if people come to it and bring something else to it. That's fine. But my interest in some ways is is how beautiful and what we would consider abstract real life can be.
Yeah, real life really.
Yeah, and so I spend a lot of time doing things that people might think, well, what is that really what it looks like? And sometimes I'll have to show them the original picture, and they're like, oh wow, the original picture doesn't look real either. So it's funny. But so that's one of the ones that has more of the color that I saw.
Yeah, I would. That's not how I would.
Yeah, the one on my left.
Okay, we could talk about that one next.
Probably the most. It's my most famous piece in the sense that there are Antarctic cruise lines that carry that card.
Oh yeah, that's the scene. That's beautiful.
And that's the one that's probably the most typically Antarctic. People can say, oh yes, I could see how that would be. This is one of the pieces.
That is just lovely. That really is.
Thank you. I hope to get a sense of scale in some of these, and I use very large pieces of paper. I've painted this scene many times, even larger pieces than that.
That's what it looked like from the boat, I imagine.
Yes, we were in a Zodiac at that point, which is it was invented by Jacques Cousteau, and it's essentially like a rubber dinghy.
Oh.
You know, it's a big rubber dinghy.
Yeah.
And you get off the boat, and there were probably 6 people who can fit in it, aside from the people who are driving the boat. And then you get off, and then you either take a water trip, like sometimes we would go out and do whale watching from these little boats, or we would go onto the shore. Or we would watch the calving of glaciers, and so we would be on the little boat from a distance, obviously.
Right, yeah.
And this actual photo of that, our boat was using that iceberg as a shelter from the wind.
Oh.
So
it's windy. It's very windy.
It's very windy, and so we were on the dinghy, and to give you a sense of the size of these things, our boat came to about a third. No, maybe even a quarter of the height of the iceberg.
Really?
So they're huge. They're just like mountains. The first time you see them, you know, you're on the ocean, you've been on the ocean for a day or two, and you're looking out, and of course, you know, after you've been looking at the water for a while, you think, oh, you just start seeing things. And you're like, what are those white buildings? There's these giant buildings in the...
And they're those big
and then
icebergs.
you kind of get closer, and you're like, wait a minute.
That's ice?
That's ice. That's the iceberg. And they're huge, and you see them, you know, just like, at first you can't even believe it. They're like these huge buildings.
So this really inspired your painting. I mean, you began painting you haven't been painting like all your life, and you've done such an amazing work in such a short time.
Thank you.
Would you say 4 years
Yes.
that you've been painting? But it started with your inspiration for painting ice.
Right.
That's just so amazing.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to talk about the one behind me. I don't know which way should I move to get out of the way? The other way? Oh, you got it, okay.
This is a painting, a series I'm doing, and I've just started it last year. These are bones from an abandoned whaling station in Antarctica. When you go to Antarctica, I mean, clearly there was an industry there, was whaling at one point. Now it's all science. But I was really struck and haunted by this place where they had these rusted, huge storage vats for the oil, and they're all rusted because they're all abandoned, and the place is littered with whale bones. There are no land mammals that would eat bones or gnaw on them. There are no bugs that would eat away at the bones.
So the bones are pristine. Like.
The bones are pristine, and they will be there until the wind, you know, wears them away.
That'd be years, I imagine.
All of the bones I'm painting are at least 40 years old. I've decided to do a series of 300 of these paintings because...
Bone paintings. Whalebones.
Whalebones, because I couldn't understand why I kept going back to the bones. What was so interesting about it to me? And then I started reading a little bit through my son, had some books on whales and stuff, and I realized, reading about blue whales, in particular.
That's what they are, is blue whales?
I don't know that these bones are blue whale bones, but they are the same type of whale, a baleen whale, as opposed to a toothed whale. These bones are. But I wanted, when I went down to Antarctica, I was like, oh, I just hope I see a blue whale. I'd love to see a blue whale. I've seen them when I was little, and the Museum of Natural History in New York has this huge blue whale, and I used to always visit it.
Now, you don't see blue whales here when you go whale watching.
No, they're really on the west coast.
Right.
So I didn't see a blue whale, and I thought, well, it's a big ocean, you know, you don't.
You can't always see a blue whale.
But then I started reading about it, and the whalers in the 19th century could not kill blue whales because they were too big. The whales, a dead whale would sink the boat. They don't float when they're killed. Like right whales would float.
Right. They were the right whales to get.
Exactly. So they left the blue whales alone. And in the early 20th century, they figured out how to do it. And you had to do 2 boats and this whole thing.
And that's when the slaughter started on the poor blue whale.
So between 1915, I think, and 1965, which is the moratorium, over 300,000 blue whales were killed in the Antarctic seas alone. And they anticipate that there's about 300 left in the Antarctic seas. There are other populations that are doing better. They don't know that that particular population will survive. And so I decided to do a series of 300 of these paintings. Again, I don't know that these are specifically blue whale bones.
But probably
But they're
they
pretty
are.
big, and they're just astonishingly beautiful, and it's a very moving place to go. And so
they keep people from touching the bones, right?
No, you can touch them, you walk over.
You can't take them, because it's illegal.
Physically, you could not take one.
Oh, because they're big.
They're huge. I mean, these things, if you go, you know, the New Bedford Whaling Museum and the Harvard Museum of Natural History both have whale skeletons.
Right.
And when you stand next to them, you just think to yourself, could I carry one of those home in my suitcase? No. You could not. I mean, they're huge. And they're incredibly beautiful animals. And so I just was so taken by them. So I'm very early in the process. I have finished painting number 16.
Okay,
out of 300.
Let's talk about, you like watercolors, obviously. That's your choice of medium,
right?
Because it works best for ice, I'm sure.